Hi, I'm Amy and welcome to my channel. I'm a relationship mentor and I specialise in healing attachment styles so that you can have the secure, fulfilling relationship that you want. And this video is for you if you are currently in a relationship that's really hit a bump in the road. Maybe there's a lot of conflict. Maybe you're not even talking right now. But these are going to be my top 5 tips on what to do if this is you. And these are really tried and tested methods that I used myself to really transform my relationship into what I wanted it to be like. So if it is that you feel like you're stuck in a power struggle and you can't really see a way out of it, these tips are really going to help you if you implement those into your own life. So stick around to the end of the video and I will give you all of my hints and tips on what to do. If you like this channel, please consider subscribing and liking this video so that other people can see it and have access to it. Okay, so let's dive in. So tip number 1 is figure out what your attachment style is, because when these conflicts happen in a relationship, it tends to really trigger your attachment trauma, and your behavior and your actions and even the words that you say will be a trauma response. Okay, so when we look at what our attachment style is, and I have got quite a few videos on how to look at what your attachment style is so that you can see what characteristics belong within each attachment style. And from there you can really see what your triggers are likely to be, what your core wounds are likely to be, and how you act in a relationship. Because when you're in a pattern of behaviour, when you're within a subconscious pattern, it's really difficult to see it. But I mean, this is going back for me around 12 months ago, where I discovered what my attachment style was, and it was so helpful to the degree that I trained in it so I could share this knowledge with you guys. And it really did call me out on quite a lot of stuff that I needed to heal. And, you know, I really did go all in on healing this because it really connected the dots as to why we had the patterns that we did. So we'd break up all the time. There'd be push-pull. There were quite a few abusive patterns going on in the relationship that I didn't understand why they were there. I felt quite victimized, and so did he. Because, you know, my behaviour and his, you know, they weren't conducive to a harmonious, secure relationship because we weren't secure within. We weren't secure within ourselves. So how could we show up and have a secure relationship when we got so much trauma going on that was unhealed? So that's my first tip, is discovering what your attachment style is so that you can start healing it and so that you can have the relationship that you want. Not that conflict's a bad thing. Conflict isn't in itself a bad thing. And in my opinion, 99% of the problems that couples have are resolvable. I didn't used to think this, but when I started to change my mindset in that, you know, there will be a resolution to this, I just don't know what it is yet. When I changed my perception on what conflict actually was, and that conflict could be resolved without either of us having to, you know, give the other person power or, you know, give in, that was really a turning point for both of us, where we could have conflict, both feel seen, heard and understood, but also have a solution that suited both of us as well at the same time. So no one felt like they were having to give something up to the other person. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, so the second thing I did was I committed to using this relationship as a mirror. And what I mean by that is that I would see my partner as part of me, in that he would trigger certain feelings, certain responses, certain subconscious patterns within me. And I would see how we would mirror each other as well. And, you know, it got to the point where, you know, he would be afraid of commitment. And when I looked at myself honestly, I was also afraid of commitment. And, you know, we would act from that, and we would act from that place of fear. So when you look at your relationship in this way and see it as a mirror, you stop seeing that person as responsible for your feelings and your actions, because ultimately that person isn't responsible for how you behave, and you are not responsible for how they behave. What you are responsible for is your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own actions. And for me, at first, this was a really bitter pill to swallow, because I would be, no, it's his fault. He said this to me, that's why I'm angry. It's his fault I'm angry. It's his fault I'm upset. When actually it wasn't. It was an action or something he'd said that had triggered a pain point within me that caused me to act a certain way. And when I went in and I healed these pain points, it didn't bother me as much. So instead of being so reactive to him, I would sit back and think, why am I so bothered by this? What is going on within me that is making me behave in this way that I don't like? I don't like it, so why am I doing it? And that was a real turning point, and that really resolved a lot of the conflict issues. It resolved a lot of these on-off patterns that we had, because instead of feeling upset and pushing him away, I was able to hold space for my emotion, take space if I needed to, but then come back to it and have an actual healthy conversation about it, rather than suppressing it or blowing up and pushing him away. The relationship would be over and we would start the painful cycle over and over again. So this leads me on to tip number 3, which is learning how to communicate with each other. This was an uncomfortable point for both of us, because neither of us were particularly good at communicating what our boundaries were, communicating what our needs were, unless it was in an argument and it was screamed at the other person. So we had to get good at communicating these things to each other. And the way that I did this was I would understand that whatever he says is valid, and whatever he says, whether it's right or wrong about me, as long as it's said in a respectful way, I committed to listening. I committed to taking on board what he was saying. I wasn't committing to changing everything about myself just to suit him. That isn't what I'm saying. But I would at least listen to what he had to say and try and understand. So I made the goal of these conversations to understand him and to communicate myself a lot better, where I could articulate my feelings a lot better about things, and I wasn't so reactive. So it wasn't coming out all wrong, and it wasn't, shouted. I wasn't getting frustrated. I was doing it from a place where I was calm and I'd collected myself, and I understood myself a lot better. I understood what my needs were. I understood what my boundaries were, so I could communicate these a lot better. And once we both got this down, life became so much easier and the relationship became so much easier, because we both felt seen, heard and understood. And that was really one of the big things that put our relationship on the right path, where we could move forward a lot quicker, and we trusted each other a lot better, because we knew if we came to the other person with an issue or a problem, or a boundary had been overstepped, we knew that the other person was going to be open to receiving it. Tip number 4 is focusing on you. And all of the tips, to be honest, are centered around you. But when you are purposely focusing on yourself and you are focusing on the other areas of your life, because remember, you are the center and everything else is just an offshoot of you. You really do come first, because if your cup is empty, you are going to be needy, you are going to be desperate, you are going to need comforting. And I'm not saying that this isn't okay, but what I am saying is that it's always a good idea to make sure that you can fill your cup at least halfway. Because what one of our problems was, because I will say, I did put a lot of pressure on the relationship and a lot of pressure on him to fulfill my needs. And I put a lot of expectations on the relationship, and that didn't do it any good. And, you know, what that led to was a lot of micromanaging and a lot of fear around the relationship. And I would notice very, very small things and make a huge drama out of them. So when I sat back and focused on me and started understanding myself a lot better, i.e. what my yeses and nos were, what my boundaries were, and what my cut and runs were, and understood that unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. And once I started looking at how I could meet my own needs a lot better, and stop outsourcing my satisfaction and my fulfillment onto the relationship, that helped me relax so much more. And I was a lot nicer to be around as well. I wasn't clingy and I wasn't needy. I wasn't so obsessive within the relationship. I'm not saying I don't have needy moments. You know, I do, and that's fine. Everybody has them. But when you are consistently operating from a place of need and desperation, that energetically is going to push that person away, because there is an awful lot of pressure on them to caretake and to go out of their way to fit your needs when you're not necessarily taking their needs into account. Leads me on to tip number 5. And tip number 5 is to change the belief that it's 2 people make 1, or 50-50 makes 100%. No, you are both 100%, and you come together in a relationship. What we had was a very codependent relationship, where I in particular would fall into fear patterns. So I would fawn quite a lot if there was an argument, and I would put my own needs aside to fulfill his, so that he wouldn't leave me, or so that we wouldn't have conflict. And when I stopped doing that and I started to focus on what my needs in that moment were, that helped me break these codependent patterns. And what I also noticed was, with these codependent patterns, the outcome really was to fulfill my own needs, and that would, you know, and to keep me safe. But it wasn't helping the relationship at all, and we would fall into these patterns quite frequently. So what I started to do in these situations was to think, what do I need in this moment, and give it to me, give it to myself, so that we could have a relationship that was more interdependent. So we weren't relying on each other to fulfill these needs buckets that we had that we couldn't fill ourselves. And through these 5 things, I feel really transformed the relationship, where we were in a place where we could comfortably live in each other's company, which is what I wanted. I wanted a relationship where we lived together. I wanted a relationship that was harmonious. I wanted it to be where we were on the same page, where we could see eye to eye, but also have our own lives, and also fulfill our own needs through different areas of life, and not just rely on each other. Because when you're solely relying on one person to meet your needs, or we believe that that person is the only person that can meet our needs, it puts so much pressure, and it creates a lot of fear, and it creates a lot of anxiety that you're acting through and not even realizing that you're doing it. So when you learn how to fulfill these needs yourself, to a point, I'm not saying that it's, you know, that you can't rely on other people, of course you can, but it is always helpful to learn how to fulfill your own needs in some way, in a healthy way. When you learn how to fulfill your own needs, subconsciously you're not squeezing that person, you're giving them freedom, and you're giving them their own autonomy. But when we believe that that's the only person that can meet our needs, that's when we feel like we're addicted to that person. We feel very needy, very desperate, and very anxious. And it's not a good feeling. It's not a nice feeling. But when you can meet your needs yourself, you can relax into the relationship a lot better. You will be more easygoing. So those are my top 5 tips on what I did, and I hope that you can glean something from this so that you can use these tips in your own life to see if you can transform your own relationship. I guarantee if you do these things, your relationship will change. you will change, and you will find that you navigate these power struggles or these difficult times with ease and with understanding and with compassion, rather than on and off again, rather than the threat of a breakup. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you like this channel, please consider subscribing, and I will see you in my next video.